Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, Kuro Games has gone ahead and blessed us with quite a bit of news recently, and much of it is regarding the release of an unannounced character. Okay, enough jokes aside. We've got Iuno's weapon, the official reveal of it, at least on the Twitter page, but it has actually been available in the game for quite a while. And of course, what we're going to be discussing is whether or not you should actually be pulling this thing, because naturally weapons in Wuthering Waves are considered one of like the bigger investments you can make in the game, and oftentimes you want to look for weapons that might be usable on more than just the character that it's a signature for, because, well, 70 plus pulls can potentially be a lot, and you want to make sure you're maximizing the value of that. So what we're going to do is, with all of this available information to us, decide whether or not it's worth your astrite. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get right on into it. But before we begin, if you're looking to pull Iuno or her weapon and thinking about buying some lunite, you'd probably like to save some cash. LD Shop is a fantastic way of doing that, and I'll show you exactly why. LDshop.gg gives you access to huge discounts on pretty much anything you can buy in a ton of games. But let's click on WooWa for now. The monthly pass? Usually it's $5 dues, but on LD Shop, it'll be much less. What a deal! To claim one of these discounts, just select the item you're looking for and click Top Up to submit your payment. You'll need your Kuro linked account email, password, and username. This might seem a bit off, but remember that LD Shop already works with sensitive account information with their emulator, LD Player, so you can trust them for their services. They also have excellent reviews on Trustpilot. If you created an account with Gmail or Facebook, use the directions in the top up menu to link your account to an email. After finalizing your payment info, wait a couple of minutes and your items will be on your account. New users can get a 15% discount and an additional 5% using my sponsored link, and first-time top-up bonuses are available as well. That means you can get some big discounts. Spending $80 or more will net you a VIP membership, which can get you a free 30-day lunite subscription. So try LD Shop today. So, the first place that we're going to start off when it comes to this weapon is, of course, taking a look at, how it looks aesthetically, then get on into its base stats. So it's all glowing and shit. That's pretty cool. All right, so the base stats over here are going to be pretty damn interesting, pretty unique. Actually, it's going to have an attack of 500 and a whopping massive crit rate of 36%. And so this is a very, very, very interesting blend of stats that's only seen on typically more like supportive sub DPS characters. There are some, differentiators on the roster like Carlotta's weapon and stuff like that, but this weapon essentially trades the base stats on attack in exchange for a higher critical stat. And so what that means is essentially when a weapon has lower base attack, what that means is, well, we'll just use Carlotta as an example because The Last Dance is a weapon like this. That means that the character's attack is typically going to be a lot lower than if they had another type of weapon. The idea is that this attack now is 1049, and so all of these attack bonuses that you have, percentage attack ones, things like from your echoes and stuff like that, like this 9.4%, they all scale off of your base attack relative to your attack total. And so what that means is when you switch to a weapon like this, you're getting more of that crit stat, but all of these other bonuses, right, the ones that we just talked about, Buster Your Teammate, Moonlit Clouds, Sonata Sets, all of those, they don't scale as well. And the trade-off typically is, well, you have way better critical stats in exchange, and that's where the damage actually occurs. And the thing is, weapons that typically have like a higher crit rate stat, this means that the character's super fucking easy to build, crit ratio wise, because they'll have so much free crit relative to another weapon. This is about 12% more than what you would get from other weapons. That's in a lot of ways close to 2 substats, especially if they're at the minimum of 6.3. That means that with this weapon, you're probably going to be able to like miss a crit rate roll or 2. I do it oftentimes with characters that are running weapons like Stringmaster, miss a crit rate roll or 2, but then still have a ratio that's like 70 to like 80% crit. And that flexibility alone, especially when echo building, can be a big struggle for a lot of players. That level of flexibility in your build, in exchange for lower potential scaling on your attack, it is something that can be a good trade-off for a lot of players. And when it comes to a sub DPS that's typically not doing as much damage as a main DPS, like is, well, not too bad of a deal going on over here. Easier building, more consistent crits, but lower overall potential when it comes to damage. However, she does have some alternatives, so we'll start talking about those in just a bit. All right, now, since we covered the base stats, we've covered the impact of all of that, we talked about some of the unique differentiators there, let's do a bit of a breakdown of the weapon skill that Iuno's gonna have. And this one's gonna be a little bit interesting. The name is unpronounceable. I'll give it a shot anyways. Plenilune Radiance. Plenilune Radiance. Pleni Lune Radiancy. I know how to pronounce Radiance. I don't know how to fucking pronounce this. Anyways, let's start taking a look at the weapon effect and see what it does. So the first part of this weapon is going to increase your attack by 12%. And this is basically like the main stat that appears on pretty much every single weapon nowadays. Kuro used to have way back in the day, I think they stopped doing it because maybe it was too strong for characters like, let's just pop it up, Zhang Liao. They gain a 12% attribute damage bonus. And a 12% attribute damage bonus is pretty much in every single way better than 12% attack. So when these weapons have like a 12% attribute damage bonus, typically like their main stat is a little bit weaker. And when a weapon has a 12% attack bonus, typically the weapon effect is actually stronger. So that's kind of like the trade-off that we have going on over here. Just some context to keep in mind. Having 12% attack, that's essentially one maxed out substat. Having 12% general attribute damage bonus like this is like having 4 substats, because this is like having 12% heavy, basic, liberation, skill. It's like having all of those substat rolls in one. And that's why this is typically viewed as a little bit stronger. So that's just something to keep in mind. Next up on the weapon skill, we're going to have casting intro skill or resonance liberation. Either of those two is going to increase your resonance liberation damage by 20% for 15 seconds. If you only read the first 2 lines, this is kind of a dog shit weapon. I'm just going to be honest with you. It's actually one of the worst signatures in the game if you only look at that first part of the effect. The second part is where it gets really specific based off of Iuno's kit, and this is actually where most of the power actually is. So, obtaining a shield allows the resonance liberation damage that the character deals. It will ignore 7.2% of the target's defense for 7 seconds, stacking out to 5 times. If you're familiar with Augusta's signature, this is basically just like the gauntlet version of Augusta's signature. When you gain a shield, a certain damage type is going to start ignoring the target's defense, and it'll stack up 5 times, up to a total of basically 36% defense ignore. And that is the exact same passive effect that Iuno is going to have. It's going to have 5 stacks. The effect is triggered once every half of a second. And of course, you're able to use it with Iuno's kit because, well, let's just be honest, guys. She generates a shield on her first inherent ability. Iuno generates a shield on pretty much every single attack that she does. Pretty much every single one. She gains a shield that scales off of her attack. Iuno's weapon, however, is a little bit of a potential power creep over Augusta's. And you'll begin to notice why. When we look at Augusta's weapon, it seems a little bit shorter, description-wise, than Iuno's. That's because Iuno has another effect on her weapon. This effect is triggered once every 0.5 seconds. That's where Augusta's end, but she also has an additional. When you use an intro skill, this effect reaches max stacks immediately, lasting for 3 seconds. So, this is the thing. This weapon, because it has this specific line, actually has some very interesting potential use cases on other members of the roster. Obviously, she's going to be able to make use of this regardless of whether or not the effect is there, because she regularly applies shields. But this one over here seems like even if you don't apply shields, you'll still get the effect for at least 3 seconds. 36% defense ignore for a very short period of time. Maybe there are some characters that will be able to use that. But anyways, right, it's very clear this weapon, its power budget is split across a resonance liberation damage boost, and then it's also going to be split across its defense ignore. And when the wielder uses a resonance skill, they gain the max fully stacked effect of this buff for a minimum of 3 seconds. And so, ladies and gentlemen, this weapon, if I'm reading it correctly, at a baseline, is always going to provide this resonance liberation damage bonus. And if you can regularly apply shields, maybe if you're like a John Shin, you might be able to activate it, but then you're playing DPS John Shin, right? So I don't really think that this character over here, that a lot of people are speculating, right, might be able to use it because she does use gauntlets. I'm just going to be real. This character doesn't really deal damage in the first place. Her scalings aren't particularly great. And while she can generate a shield on her Forte circuit when she uses like her full Forte bar and then does like the charge and everything, you can see that, like, yeah, the motion values are all right. Like, the ability as a whole does like 1,000 damage, but you're spending like 10 seconds charging. Not really like 10. You're spending a lot of time charging this up, and it's kind of like the only damage that's like available in her kit. So it's like, it's a bit rough trying to actually like figure her out as like a DPS unit. You can try it out, and she will be able to, I'm gonna be honest, she will be able to generate a fair amount of that shielding bonus, that defense ignore bonus. Another character that, shockingly enough, might actually benefit a fair amount from this is Zhang Liao. Yes, I understand. Zhang Liao's rotation time is quite long. However, his liberation is an incredible burst of damage that deals around 1466%. That's a lot of damage. And the thing with Zhang Liao is that he uses this liberation right after using an intro skill. And so at a baseline, Zhang Liao should be able to gain the bonus of this 20% liberation damage and the defense ignore for at least a couple of these hits. And this one over here is a pretty considerable goddamn nuke. It is pretty damn big. And, well, naturally, the buff on the defense ignore side is going to fall off relatively quickly. But at a bare minimum, right, you might be able to get a nice screenshot or two. So that's just something to keep in mind. However, at the end of the day, right, this is a somewhat inflexible weapon. Yes, you'll be able to access Giga Burst mode for 3 seconds, but 3 seconds is not a particularly long amount of time, especially for a character like Zhang Liao, whose rotation could take upwards of like 14 seconds to actually do. And so not a lot of it is going to be buffed over there. Other Gauntlet users, I mean, theoretically, right, you could think about like Ling Yang. Even though Ling Yang doesn't really deal liberation damage. I mean, that defense ignore, he might be able to come in. Yeah, he might be able to come in and, like, do something. I'm not really an expert on Ling Yang. You can see over here how much I've actually invested in the unit. And so there might actually be a lot more potential than I thought. But at the end of the day, right, well, I'll leave judgment on that to other individuals who have actually built the character. When it comes to, like, Rosia, I'm just gonna be honest, I don't particularly recommend this. And one of the reasons for that is that Rosia literally deals 0 liberation damage in her kit. Literally none. Every single attack in her kit is either a basic attack or a heavy attack, or resonant skill. Her liberation is converted to heavy attack damage. So, essentially, it's just a stat stick on her. But this is the other thing. You might like this weapon on Rosia, not because of the weapon effect, not because of the defense ignore, not because of any of that shit, but because this weapon gives 36% crit rate. And let me explain why. Because Rosia has this passive on her liberation where, for every crit rate she has above 50%, her liberation buffs the attack of the team. And she needs a 70% crit rate to be able to fully activate it. I have her signature. I have some of the most absurd echo rolls in the game. 10.5% crit rate, 9.3% crit rate, 9.3% crit rate, 7.5, and then a 6.9. I have those rolls, and I'm at 72.8%. This character is hard to build to maximize that buff out. And having this weapon come in with 36% crit rate will, for a lot of players, actually make Rosia feel better buff-wise than using your actual signature. Because your echo rolls, you'll be able to actually miss crit rate echo rolls and still cap out her attack buff. I'm not even joking. That is the potential of this weapon on her, and that's kind of neat. So yeah, you won't basically get any effect at all from this. There's nothing beneficial to gain over here. And, well, the base stats, though, they might be enough. The last note that I'll make is in regards to Zhang Xin. I actually messed up in the prior explanation I made for her. This weapon is complete dog shit on Zhang Xin. And that's because the only type of damage this effect works with is liberation damage. So it doesn't even matter if Zhang Xin can come onto the field. It wouldn't even matter if she could fully stack it up because Zhang Xin mainly deals heavy attack damage. She doesn't actually deal that much liberation damage at all. And that's the only thing that's benefiting from the defense ignore. So you can just kind of think about it that way. This weapon is kind of like just for Zhang Liao for like 1 burst. It's just for Iuno. And of course, right, Rosia has a bit of an edge case on it as well. When it comes to other Gauntlet users, I think there's kind of only one that people might care about. Zoni. I don't recommend that shit on her. Like, she don't need crit rate. And the reason why she don't need crit rate is the standard weapon might actually be better on Zoni because she already has a set that gives her 20%. She already has a set that gives her 20% fucking crit rate. So it's a bit like she would overcap to hell and then also have lower attack scaling. It's a terrible idea with the base stats of this weapon to give it to any character that is using the Spectral Frazzle set that gives them 20% crit, because you're spending so much of your attack budget to gain crit, but then you're overcapping on crit anyway, so all you're getting is like low attack. This is kind of also one of the reasons why Phoebe as a main DPS character kind of has like a bit of a shorter ceiling, because her weapon has the same exact stat profile. Her ceiling feels a lot lower than other DPS units because of how the base stats on the weapon work. So yeah, that's going to be our breakdown. That's going to be all of like the potential users of the weapon and why I think they may or may not be good with it based off the base stat and of course the weapon effect. Now let's start talking about some of the potential alternatives to Iuno's weapon, right? There are going to be a lot of people who see the effect, maybe think it's not that strong, maybe think that they don't need the crit rate, blah, 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 or you don't have the pulls. What are the other options that you can use? And this is the situation. Iuno's weapon options are so good and so flexible. She has so many different sets that she can use that pulling this weapon might be one of the most, depending on the state of your account and how much you like spend on certain packages and stuff like that, it might be one of the worst decisions you can make in the game. I'm just going to be honest with you. The facts of the matter are quite simple. If you have Zhang Li Yao's signature, you should, under no circumstance, ever pull Iuno's weapon. I'm just going to be honest. This signature will carry you through. You'll be able to do your main DPS Iuno. You'll be able to do all of that, slaughter on Crown of Valor. If you use this weapon, you might have close to like a 5%, if not less, DPS loss compared to using your signature. And the reason for that is quite simple. Iuno, with her kit design, is able to maintain full uptime on Zhang Liao's weapon buff effect. This thing, when you use a liberation, you gain a 40% liberation damage bonus for 8 seconds. Then gets extended every time you use a resident skill. And so what Iuno does is she clearly uses her liberation at the start of her rotation, right? She's meant to, based off of the design of her kit. She uses her liberation at the start. And then she has access to about 300 different resident skills. She got a baseline one, she got an enhanced one, she got a second enhanced one, and she has a third enhanced one that has 2 charges. So it's like this character straight up was intentionally designed to work with Verity's handle. Kuro could have easily removed a shit ton of the resonant skills from her kit, made it activate on heavy attacks or like basic attacks or liberation casts like Carlotta, but instead they decided to intentionally design Iuno's kit to fully maximize the uptime of this buff. And so using this weapon instead of Iuno's signature is like perfect. There's no need to pull her sig if you have this one. And the thing with Zhang Liao and his signature is that a lot of people have this thing, especially if they're day 1 players, because people got him for free in version 1.2. They were like, what do I do with all these pulls? I just got the character for free. And then they pulled his weapon. That was literally the thought. Zhang Liao's weapon is one of the most owned signatures in the game because of what went down during version 1.2. And if you fall into that bucket, well, ladies and gentlemen, you've got the solution right here. So you slot Iuno on Crown of Valor, you give her all the damage buffs, you give her this weapon that provides massive damage buffs, and I'm gonna be real, based off of your Iuno's build and who's on her team, this could actually out-damage Iuno's weapon. And you want to know why this could out-damage Iuno's weapon on Iuno? Because of the base attack. Because this thing has 87 more base attack, and if you're building Iuno as like a raw main DPS, there's a potential chance if she's getting like buffs like Moonlit Clouds, etc. from like another teammate, that additional scaling from the higher base stats, let's remember, her weapon only has 500, Zhang Liao's has 587, she might actually be better main DPS-wise on this one. And I'm not even joking. If you have a Shorekeeper on her team and like a Mortifi or something like that, she might genuinely actually be better. So yeah, that's just a bit of a disclaimer over here. Obviously, I haven't gone in and done the calcs, but I'm simply explaining my reasoning for why I think that might be the case. So this is clearly right. If you have this weapon, don't even bother pulling for Iuno's signature. You'll be able to use the same exact sets, blah, 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 all of that. What if you don't have this weapon? And this is the thing, right? If you don't have this weapon, that's not much of a concern either. And the reason for that is quite simple. Maybe you don't have Zhang Liao's weapon, but you've been doing this thing called, I don't know, buying the Battle Pass. And you'll notice, wow, the Battle Pass weapons all give liberation damage. It almost doesn't matter, right? If you have Stonard, you can just use this because it gives liberation damage and crit. But if you want the new BP weapon, well, that also gives you attack and liberation damage. So it's kind of just like, well, it depends on whether or not you want crit damage or you want crit rate. The effects are kind of almost the same regardless. They'll boost your attack, they'll boost your damage. It's just one doesn't split across two stats. One just gives one stat as a whole. So the BP weapons are tailor-made for her as well. That's another option, right? A lot of people have Stonard R5 because of Zhang Liao too. And the standard weapon, I'm just gonna be honest here when it comes to the standard weapon, it's not like that bad on her. Yes, she can use some basic attacks in her rotation, but she's going to benefit a lot from the ER, and the raw attack just kind of works out for her anyways, because, well, she could just use like a crit rate 4 cost instead, and then all the attack is going to be buffing her damage. And with the built-in ER, that helps smooth out her rotations, and, well, it's a bit of a benefit you can have on the substat side. Blazing Justice and Tragic Comedy, no, don't really use these. I feel like these are like... They might technically be better than the standard weapon on her, but honestly, I would prefer the ER over these weapon effects that pretty much don't fucking do anything on her. They give attack, right? But if I'm already in sort of like budget zone, I'm not using Zhang Liao Sig, I'm not using any of these, then it's sort of just like, I could just use the standard one instead and then gain, you know, sort of these bonus stats. So yeah, I mean, these are usable just based off of like the attack bonus and the base stats alone. But it's like, let's just be real here, right? There are some more flexible options and it's kind of like a trade-off between these three, but you're guaranteed to be able to have this if you really want it. So yeah, I mean, it's just... Her weapon options, as you're beginning to notice, right, she has a lot of them. Some of them are a little bit more premium, but at the end of the day, right, even if you're, like, not having any BP stuff, you don't have the standard weapon, you don't have Verity's Handle, you don't have any of these, right, you could just make a craftable too, right? Legend of the Drunken Hero is not, like, bad. It's not the preferred option in a lot of scenarios, but you can just craft this thing and then also be able to pretty meaningfully stack up at least part of its effect. And it has nice base stats too. So that's kind of like the last resort option that you can use. It's just, let me just say it this way. Unless you plan on playing her as like a main DPS, because her role involves buffing teammates primarily and healing them, I don't really see a reason to pull this thing. You're buffing a sub DPS's damage, and while her damage can be significant, it's like, well, it's a bit of a hard use case. If you're going to be going ahead and using other weapons, things like Aether Strike, Stonarge, Legend of the Drunken Hero, you can also just put Iuno on Moonlit Clouds. Iuno's kit basically involves her, right? Providing a massive amount of damage buffs to the team via her outro skill that gives 50% damage amp. You could just put her on Moonlit with a lower quality weapon and still get a fuck ton of value out of her anyways because her buffs are so strong. And it's only if you're focusing on her personal damage you would use any of these things. And the case is, if you have Verity's Handle, you might as well just use that and then build her for damage. You can also do that with Abyss Surges. It's just, this weapon, unfortunately, is not very high value. And it's not really that usable on other units. Zhang Liao's signature is going to be better on other units compared to this one. And so it might just be based off of the base stats, based off of that extra crit rate. Maybe there's a use case for it over there for your Rosia, but I'm just going to be honest over here. This thing is not looking particularly valuable. There might be some people that get baited on into it, but if you do want to play her main DPS, it is going to be a very nice thing to grab. But make sure you test out her performance on Zhang Liao's signature first, especially if you're trying to play her as a main DPS and see how she functions with that thing. Because you might notice that the difference, the delta between those two is so insignificant, much like how when you use Augusta, there's pretty much no differentiation between using Verdant Summit and Thunderflare Dominion. There's no difference when you use Gion's signature and you use this thing. Like, the clear time is basically almost identical. And it's going to be a very, very similar situation for Iuno. And so, yeah, that's going to be the in-depth breakdown. And I know there might be some potential Iuno pullers that might not be very happy with the reasoning that I've given. But this is the thing, ladies and gentlemen. Weapons are expensive. Pulls are expensive. We will be getting 20 pulls for Iuno when she arrives. But at the end of the day, right, guys, you want to get a lot of value out of the stuff that you're spending your resources on. And it's safe to say that Augusta's weapon and Iuno's weapon are potentially some of the lowest value ones in the game, but that does depend on some of the past pulls that you've made. And their value rises a lot if you don't have those previous 1.0 signatures. Final note, I just find it so ironic that the Genshin Impact developers were the ones that were claiming that Genshin didn't want to make money, because if you look at the weapons that were released in version 2.6 for Wuthering Waves, it's actually very clear that Kuro Games didn't really want to make money with how they designed these things, with how they designed Augusta and Iuno, because Augusta and Iuno were intentionally made to work with old 1.0 weapons, and Kuro did not need to do that. They did not need to make the kits of these characters work so well with Jian or work so well with Zhang Liao's weapons, but they are perfectly aligned, and it is one of the most veteran-friendly things I've ever seen a company do. So, yeah, that's just the final note that I have on this. There might be some people upset that our weapon isn't better, but that's just my take. So, yeah, that will be that for this one, ladies and gentlemen. Let me know what you all thought about our breakdown, whether or not I missed some crucial points, or if there are some other reasons for why you should actually pull this, and peace out.